Good morning, all you folks out there in YouTube land. Thrash Pondo here, and I'm presenting today part 2 of my friend of channel request micro reviews. But before I get to that, don't let me forget to ask that you all like, subscribe, share, forward, and all those other wonderful things to get my algorithms going. And one more thing before I forget. This coming Thursday, September 29th, at 8 p.m., I'm doing another one of my world famous live chats. So feel free, all are welcome. Please join me. Heck, bring a friend. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all for that. But before I get too far off topic, let me begin with phase 2 of my friend of channel review spotlight. And I'm going to start with friend of channel John H's request to do Uncle Croc's Rock Block. And you can't tell me the term, "this is a croc," didn't come up at least once in the pitch meeting. But in any event, Uncle Croc's Rock Block was a Saturday morning kids show that ran during the 75-76 TV season, and was itself a spoof on kids shows. Charles Nelson Riley played the aforementioned Uncle Croc, and yes, he wore a particularly ridiculous plush crocodile costume. And he would be your typical Saturday morning kid show host. He would do little vignettes and gags in between the cartoons he presented, and that was the sort of show within a show. Permanent guest host being played by Jonathan Harris, who played his constantly bickering director who always wore one of those old French berets that no one ever actually did wear, but always did on 50s, 60s, and 70s TV shows. The truly amazing thing was how much talent it was able to get to perform as guests. Bowery Boys star Hunts Hall played a character called Mr. Mean Jeans. Stanley Adams from Gilligan's Island and Star Trek was also on it as well. Carl Ballantyne from McHale's Navy. Alice Ghostly from Bewitched, among many other things. Phyllis Diller from Everything. And Marv Kaplan, probably best known for doing voices on Top Cat. All did guest appearances on this show. Not to mention some of the biggest names in Saturday morning animation as well. Robert Ridgely, who was the voice of the 70s. He was Tarzan, he was Flash Gordon, he was Thunder the Barbarian. He was actually both voices and live action in this show. He played a character called the $6.95 Man, which was a low-budget spoof on the $6 Million Man. Lenny Weinrib also loaned his voices. He's probably best known for his Time for Timer character. Alan Melvin, Sam the Butcher, who also did a number of other voice acting as well, specifically on the Banana Splits. And of course, Alan Oppenheimer, the voice of Skeletor. What more can I say? Now, why did a show with this much talent fail? Well, a couple of reasons. One, they were kind of phoning it in. The whole show seemed to have all been done in one take. So it wasn't quite as polished as, well, as my show is, shall we say. But probably the big thing was it was up against some pretty hard nuts to crack. It was up against Far Out Space Nuts, one of the most legendary kid shows of that time, and of course the animated version of Planet of the Apes. So I think it was competition with what killed it. And I'm now going to move on to friend of channel Cindy D's request to cover Good Times. Good Times was a CBS series which ran from 1974 to 1979 and was itself a spin-off on Maude. Never Explained is how Maude takes place in Queens, New York, and Good Times in the projects of Chicago. That's one heck of a commute. But that's another story. And it was meant to be a sort of updated version of Father Knows Best, with John Amos as the strong father figure who each week the family faces some type of trial and or tribulation, and with his strength of character and fatherly persona gets them out of it. it wasn't just going to be a comedy. It was going to tackle some pretty serious issues, at least for the time. So it was intended more as a dramedy. Unfortunately, this was never able to unfold because very early on it became obvious that the character of JJ was the most popular in the show, and the focus very quickly shifted to him. This caused no end of distress to John Amos, who was later fired for the series, but not just him as well. Esther Roll, who played the mother, was also very disturbed. You see, a lot of people in the black community have charged the character of JJ as being a very, very negative cliche. He's lazy, he's dumb, he's silly. I must confess, I never picked up on that when I watched the show in my youth because I just saw him as a typical teenager. And all the teenagers I knew were lazy, dumb, and silly. But I can see how the black community would definitely see it as buying into negative stereotypes. As a result, Esther Roll also left the show at one point. And, well, it did kind of put a damper on it, although it did remain a very successful show right up until its cancellation. And it's also known as being the showcase for a very, very, very young Janet Jackson pre-Velvet Rope. I'm now going to go on to it. This is a little embarrassing. I got a request to do Captain Fathom and Space Angel, but I can't for the life of me remember who asked me to do it. So I'm going to present this micro review, and if you like it, it was meant for you. And, well, long story short, both of these were animated kid shows from the Cambria Studios, best known for bringing us Clutch Cargo. And both were known for using the Synchrovox technique, which is basically limited animation mixed together with some live action shots to create a very sort of kitschy, slick feel to it. Both shows were worked on by legendary comic book author Alex Toth, who, and you can definitely see his influence, particularly with Space Angel. He was known for attributing what I can only describe as sci-fi classical. There was a lot of, shall we say, Roman Empire themes in what was a futuristic show. There were future gladiatorial games. The enemy forces wore uniforms very similar to Roman legionnaires. We've seen a lot of that since in sci-fi, but not a lot before. And of course, Captain Fathom was just that. It was a rogue sub-commander who patrolled the seas in his private submarine, looking for people in distress to save or evildoers to vanquish. Now, these series later evolved into legendary Saturday morning kids show. Actually, I believe it was one of the first. It moved on to prime time. Johnny Quest, with far improved animation, but a definite Toth influence. Oh, and a little fun fact for you film buffs out there: cult film Forbidden Zone. Danny Elfman, who did the music, does an homage to the style of animation in the Bing Bang Boom number, where the person singing it remains absolutely still, and they superimpose a set of moving lips over him while the song is being performed. There's an anecdote where that whole thing was added after the fact because the character they got to do the lip syncing had stage fright and wasn't filming well. Whether or not that was the case or not, it's a very slick scene and a definite homage to Cambria Studios. And lastly, I have a surprise, and this one's going out to John Collins. For some time, he's been asking me to do one of my creepy classics on huge one-hit wonder song, My Sharono. I've been putting it off, but I'm going to present it to you now, John, so please enjoy. My Sharona is a 1979 hit off the Knack's Get the Knack album. and has a very interesting backstory behind it. Doug Feiser met a groupie at one of their performances who he fell instantly in love with and became, I guess you would say, amused to him and caused him to go into a 2 month songwriting barrage in which he wrote some of the best music for the group. Additionally, the two of them became romantically involved, and the groupie, I'm going to butcher her last name at least, Sharono Alperia, were together for over 4 years, and at one point had even talked about getting married. And even though they were never wed, they stayed friends right up until Miss Sharona's death of cancer many, many, many years later. Now, why does this constitute a creepy classic, you add? Well, when he met Miss Sharona, she was only 17 years old. Ew. So that, by definition, causes this song to fall into the category of creepy classics. Literally and not figuratively. In any event, that's all I got for you folks today. Hopefully you enjoyed all of the little tidbits and or bits. And I'm looking to seeing you all again very, very, very soon. Specifically tomorrow, Thursday, 9/29 at 8 p.m. for my live chat. And until then, peace. Thank you.